That's a very important question. I wanted for a long time. I wanted to make a video about that, and I have hesitated. I haven't done that, but here am I now with a recording dedicated to probably the most important question, which you yourself need to answer for yourself. And then somewhere we always do it. That's a question of who am I? It really, points us to that. It begins with self-realization, knowledge of self. That's the key. So I wanted to take a couple of moments to talk about, or answer that question, who am I? And I try to really not go too much into the story, because the story is important, of course. It can give us an indication of what it is this person went through. But then it's more importantly about the effect of this story. How did you deal with that? And how did that impact on you? And so just to begin, growing up in Germany, I was a very difficult child. I didn't like learning. I didn't like authority. Actually, I was to the point rebel where nobody could tell me anything, because I was so within my own world. And I really disliked school because I felt I was forced into a mold. And I didn't like to be there. And I also didn't like the jokes, or I didn't get the jokes of other children. So it was sometimes cruel, making fun of others. I guess I might have been a little bit geeky as a child and try to compensate for that with being a class clown, but I was never really accepted. And I didn't like school, so I was a bad student. I always felt that learning was a matter of pleasing others and doing what you're supposed to do, and I was more within my own world, and I tried to figure out why things are the way they are. And I remember around the age of 8 or 9, we had to draw a picture of God. And it really got me thinking about what that is. And also at the same time, I was confronted with images of war and suffering on TV. And I tried to really understand, how could God allow for that? And I guess I somehow began already on a quest to find those answers back then. But also I began feeling very, very bad inside. Didn't really identify with the world. Didn't identify with other children at school. I always had the sense of that I belong here, in this world, this crazy, crazy world. And I didn't, like what was happening around me. So again, I was very much within myself, my own world, and music was a great outlet for me. Wow, my dad, who was a musician. He took me many times to his work, and there were records that I picked out, and American music, many of them like soul music and funk music, and I totally fell in love with that. But then also as a child, I had a television, I had a little adapter that I could use, and with this I was able to receive the American station, or the American troops stationed in Germany. And so I grew up with American television, even though I didn't understand really much, but I totally fell in love with that. And the entertainment and show business, and Soul Train was one of the great shows I totally fell in love with. And so I had my own little world where I lived, at home. Growing up in a nice home in Germany, had my little room, which really was kind of my castle, with my little television and a record player and tape decks where I could record music, and that was, my world. But then already as a child I had a strange feeling, which also left me somewhat sad. There was the realization that one day, because I would grow up, and eventually, even though I was a terrible student, eventually even me would graduate, I would then eventually also get a job, and I would be moving away from this, and this room would be gone. So that this is temporary. This feeling of this being temporary, left me sad. But that was just one of those experiences I had. I have always had a great love for animals. I grew up with cats, greatly adored them, playing with them. They somehow very much reminded me of women, and they still do. Even though I was so shy as a child, I've never been with a girl before. Up until my marriage, not to get ahead of myself, but I was basically alone. I looked at girls, I sometimes had a crush, but I was too shy to do anything about that. So basically all of this went on, this me being isolated, living within my own world, not liking people, rejecting others, rejecting authority. Up until I was 18 years old, when I had to, didn't know what to do with myself, had no ambitions, no interests really. I had to go to the German army. And that was really an experience that opened my eyes. Because I lived with people who very much I was reminded of myself looking at these people. They were very disinterested, very negative. And I began to develop the sense that if I would continue on my path, or with this attitude, I would just end up just like these people. Bad attitude, negative, fighting with each other, rude. And I began feeling that's not me. And I also developed a sense that in school, learning basically is not a matter of learning for anybody else, for your parents or for your teachers, but you learn for yourself. And so I became really, really motivated to make up for for me being a bad student in school. And when I left the army a year and a half later, I was extremely motivated. I took English classes, I took even Japanese classes, world trade, economics, and yeah, very much a workaholic, very much a learnaholic, but also very selfish. Because I just wanted to learn for the sake of making up for that and being somebody and making a lot of money and making it in life. But I still didn't like people. Still did not like people. So I did an apprenticeship in merchandising and sales, and I worked in marketing. Great opportunity. Was right on track to go where I wanted to go. I was 24 at the time. Yeah, it was really an exciting period in my life. Absolutely, wow. But then something happened that changed my life completely, and it was a woman I met in Germany. A woman from America, 24. I met her in a youth hostel. I was working in this area, and she happened to be in the area. She actually got robbed, not to make the story too long, but very peculiar circumstances of us meeting. And we instantaneously connected. Spent only a couple of weeks together until she had to leave for America. It was during Christmas of 1990 when she had to leave. I met her in November. And so when she was gone, we were both in tears. We wrote letters back and forth. I felt like life was calling me for a great adventure. And so a couple of weeks later only, I packed my bags and moved to America at the age of 24. And 2 months later, I moved to Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas, where she lived. She was just finishing her PhD in children theater and communication. And yeah, I got married to her on March 2nd, 1991. I became integrated as a husband and father into a whole different ethnicity and culture. A year later, our first daughter was born, and 2 years later, or 14 months later, twins were born. Three children. I was with 3 children living in Kansas with a woman who was actually very different from me. She was later analyzed with bipolar. When the family became aware of that, everybody turned their back, and so I was left alone with that situation, and I really didn't know how to deal with that. And we were fighting all the time. My buttons were pushed. I was basically only looking at her for what was wrong. I tried to change her. Eventually I realized it's impossible to do that because you only can change yourself. Began gaining this realization when I began studying about personal development in the mid-90s. I also began using a voice recorder to just basically use those, to repeat those ideas that I heard by Dio Biscali or Deepak Chopra or Wayne Dyer, Anthony Robbins, because it all made sense to me. All these ideas totally made sense to me, but I didn't apply this awareness into how I was living my life. I mean, I listened to these things, it made sense to me, I was really excited, I even recorded those thoughts, I was able to repeat all these ideas. But in my personal life I was still fighting. So it took me years and years and years and years and years, a lot of introspection, and separating myself from the behavior of the person I was married to realize I have to make a change. It was very, very difficult to look at that, to deal with that, and it took me more than a decade basically. And eventually I filed for divorce. I was about to move from San Francisco to Kansas, the other way around, from Kansas to San Francisco to be with my children who already lived in this city. They were with my ex-wife's sister to get away from this bad situation, but nothing changed, so I had to file for divorce, and the children weren't sent back to Kansas to be with me, so I had to move from Kansas to San Francisco to file for visitation with my own children. When that happened, I got hit by a car, which left me homeless. Another experience which really opened my eyes to the awareness that everything that happens to you, including my marriage, this accident, they're all meant to be. It's all about experiences and what we learn from that. And so I came, to San Francisco 2004, middle of 2004, and came up with the idea of Realize to Actualize. And since then I've been really doing a lot of work on myself and to reach others with that. And people have come to me, but I still have rejected people, and I still do to a certain degree. Even though I realize it's all about people and working together and helping each other. So anyway, just to give you a little bit of the background of who am I, and thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and I sure would also hear from you, your story, your experiences, and where you would like to move toward. Thank you.